Hi, this is Rich Judge, technical agronomist for Dekalb and Asgrow in north central Iowa. Just wanted to take a moment and look through some emergence questions for the spring of 2020. Just some different things in corn we find out there and what the cause and the effect will be over time. So we'd have a number of different calls this spring on corn plants that emerged later than the rest of the stand and what the causes and so forth might be. You'll notice that I got a couple plants here right in the middle, about one collar behind those adjacent to them. A couple causes we've seen this year: drier soils in small pockets left after a field cultivation or something of that nature. Have also run into cases, particularly corn on corn, where the residue had blown back on top of the row, and the soil temperature simply was so much colder underneath that residue than in the bare spots around it that there was a difference in emergence timing. So these plants here at one collar apart probably can keep up, but honestly it's probably best to wait till they're 8-10 inches tall to actually count those collars and make a better determination of how these plants will develop. Another type of plant we've seen are these wrapped up ones, or those that appear they've leafed out slightly below the soil surface and spent a lot of time pushing their way out of the soil. A number of things I've seen cause that this season, possibly just the time it had to push. That coleoptile ruptures finally as it pushes against a hard soil surface. Sometimes you'll see them knotted up like that a little bit as you remove residue that's blown over the top of the row in like a corn on corn situation. But honestly, if you really took those plant parts apart, its stage of growth isn't that much off of the plant next to it, and it'll do a fairly decent job of keeping up. And then of course we've got some more normal plants that emerge quite rapidly. Probably the worst case scenario would be this small plant we see right in between two other large ones. They've already got two collars out, and that small one in the middle is going to be two collars behind straight out of the gate, and it's going to be very difficult for that plant to keep up and set an ear. In this particular spot we have those same type of plants that are a little bit behind the rest of the stand, but probably a little bit better scenario because it kind of happened in a strip, if you will. And so the majority of the plants through this particular area are those that are lagging a little bit behind, but they've got to compete with not one small plant competing with a bunch of larger ones. So the majority of the effect will be right here on the transition from big to small, where these other ones in the middle are going to do a fairly good job of getting to the point where they can set an ear. That ear height might be a little bit different, plant stature might be a little bit different, but they should be fairly productive. So for a quick recap of the three types of plants I'm finding out in the field, on our left here we have the late emergers. One thing these plants often have in common, as we talked about the dry soils earlier, if you look at the planting depth, they're anywhere from 1 inch to maybe 1.5 inches at best. So they were higher in the soil profile where the soil dried out more quickly, and it took recent rains to get them up and started. On the far right you've got the more normal plants. This is the bulk of the seeding we had out here today, but you'll notice the one thing they have in common is a stronger planting depth. All of these measured out almost exactly at 2 inches. And so they were in soil moisture from the get-go. The seed imbibed water and germinated. The rarer thing we've seen in a couple cases is these plants that are pinned up. And there can be two causes of that. If the pinned up tissue is above the soil surface, that was probably the frost earlier last month. Now, most of these latecomers, if they emerged below the soil surface because the coleoptile had broke just from pushing too long or whatever, you'll notice that that tissue is elongated underneath the soil. It just couldn't push through, but it'll be all squirreled around below the soil surface. If it's just the leaves pinned on top, it probably was in fact just frost. They'll eventually unwrap and be fine. That's all we have for today on Emergence. Please contact your local Dekalb and Asgrow agronomist if you have any further questions.